I'm delighted to have Manx Radio's hockey correspondent Sam Spooner in the studio with me. Sam, let's start in the Rossborough Men's Premier Division, where we'll see Ramsey A take on Valkyries A and an exciting game between Vikings A and Backers A.
Yeah, it's probably the biggest game of the weekend. Last year, Vikings Men's A was flattered to deceive. Everybody thought they might challenge Backers A. But unfortunately, it turned out that Backers A were just turned up another gear and absolutely flew away with the league with an opening day win of 7-1 against the Vikings A team. This year, Vikings A are hoping to close the gap. They've been training hard before Christmas, and they did fairly well in England Hockey Championship games as well. Unfortunately, losing out in their last game. That being said, Backers A, they are the favourites for the title, and I think Vikings A are going to really struggle in this game.
And there's a bit of a mirror image of that big game in the Rossborough Women's Premier League when Vikings A take on Backers A. Have you got similar predictions for that?
It's actually the opposite prediction. However, this is caveated by the Backers ladies were the first team to beat Vikings A on a hockey pitch in over 11 years.
Big news, that.
That was probably the biggest news in Manx hockey for quite some time. Certainly in my time doing some Manx radio and the Ironman newspapers as well. So I think Vikings A will come away with the win. But Backers A started the season fairly poorly last year, but had a really, really strong finish. So if they can start the season as they finished last year, they'll be in for a title challenge.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because, I mean, this is the first week back after Christmas. So do you think people have been taking training seriously over the festive period, or do you think it's going to be a rusty start for people?
To be honest, I think it's going to be a bit of a rusty start all round from everybody. Certainly, Vikings haven't trained so much over Christmas. We stopped. It was 2 weeks before Christmas, and they restarted last week. So they've only really had one training session before this weekend. So there is going to be a bit of rust there, and I think that's going to be the same for every team across the league. But you have to put them down as favourites, given the fact that they've only lost one game on the field of play in over 12 years, in nearly 12 years. You have to park them down as favourites for now.
Why is that? I mean, what do other teams need to do? Because the thing is about teams always winning for years and years and years is that there's, all credit to those clubs and all credit to those teams. They deserve the win, but it can make it a little bit stale for everyone else, like spectators. What do the other teams have to do to sort of spice it up a little bit?
Well, I think the thing with Vikings Ladies A is they've had the spine of their team the same. Well, the majority of their team has been the same for that whole period of time. When you look at the players that are still there now, Kirsty Cooper, Kim Carney, Jen Turner, Kirsty Bowley, and Lou Slater, just to name a few. Those players have been there more or less that whole time, and yet they've been able to bring youth players through like Georgia Foxton, Blake Kane now playing in nets for them as well. And again, I'm going to be missing players, but they're always able to feed through from the teams below, and it's that strength and depth and the fact that their core of their team has remained so consistent over that time, and they never ever rest. They're always training hard to continue, and that's not to say other teams don't train hard, but they maybe haven't had the same sort of level of consistency with the players they've got on their squads.
They're just so used to each other after playing for so long. Yeah, absolutely. A difficult one to battle. Also in the women's Prem, we've got Ramsey versus Castletown.
I think this one's going to be quite a close one. Ramsey ladies, I think have lost a couple of players in the off-season. One of which, I believe, if the grapevine is to be believed, one of them has actually moved to Castletown Ladies A.
Ooh, controversial.
Now, to face their old team this weekend, Castletown Ladies A, I started the season off last year by saying they were going to be relegation favourites, and I ended up eating my hat in the first week. So I'm actually going to place them as favourites this time, given that they actually had a really strong season last year, and they haven't really lost any players. They've gained again this season. So I think they're going to build on last year's improvement and actually sort of challenge that mid-table area.
And finally, in the women's Prem, Saracens take on Valkyries A. Who are you putting your money on?
I'm going to have to say Valkyries A, given that they are last year's champions. They performed really, really well last year. The first different league winner for over 11 years, and I keep coming back to that, but they did really well last year to pounce
that's a big deal.
on Vikings' misfortune, and really well done to them. And I think they're going to go out this season. You have to put them down as title challengers. Saracens ladies, they've been promoted last year, and they were awesome last year, has to be said. I think they're going to be found wanting a little bit at this level. It's their first experience of Premier League hockey, and they are a very young side. So I think that they are going to struggle this year, but wow, what an experience it's going to be for those youngsters.
ones to watch in the future probably as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
Moving on to the Rossborough Men's Division 1, it looks like we might have a few games of youth versus experience in this division. So you've got Vikings B versus Valkyries B, Backers B take on Castletown A, and Harlequins A versus Vikings C.
Yeah, Vikings Men's B versus Valkyries Men's B. That's probably going to be a bit of a tasty fixture. Valkyries Men's B, depending on what their first team do, really. If their men's first team sort of follow the way that their mixed first team did and just overhaul their squad with youth, which was a inspired decision by Valkyries, them ending the season winning the cup, in what was a surprise to me, and from when they said they were going to fill their squad with youngsters, and you're talking about established former Island team players being dropped down into the B team, I thought, wow, this could end up in tears. But no, they proved everybody wrong. They even had me singing their praises, and I think depending on what they do, if they get their blend right in their first team, this Valkyries B team are going to be really, really strong this year. Vikings Men's B, relegated last year. I think they're going to face a real big fight this weekend. Ian Perry, who's the captain of the Vikings B side, is set up with a nice blend of youth mixed with experience in that squad. And then if you move on to the Backers Men's B versus Castletown Men's A, you're talking about another tasty fixture with the strength and depth Backers Men's have got in their top two squads, and the fact that Castletown have dropped down from the Premier League voluntarily. It has to be said, they weren't relegated, they survived, but given they've lost a few key players, and again, the grapevine is to believed, another one or two players are to be moving clubs or have moved clubs. So I think Castletown Men's A might struggle. It just depends on how many players the Backers first teams pinch off their B team.
Which out of those two, out of Vikings B versus Valkyries B and Backers B versus Castletown A, which would you get the popcorn out for?
Oh, that's a tough one to answer. I think it's going to be a real tasty fixture in both of them, but I think there's more popcorn to be had with Backers Men's B versus Castletown Men's A.
Well, you hit it here first. In the Rossborough Women's Division 1, we've got Valkyries B going against Castletown B and Harlequins against Vikings B.
I think Vikings B are looking fairly good for this season. They started the season off well last year, sort of title challenges, and then sort of tailed off from the mid-season towards the end. Valkyries Ladies B, again, they were one of those teams that are trying to catch up with Saracens, and all the teams were sort of fighting over each other to try and catch the Saracens ladies team, and none of them even came close, to be honest with you, because they just kept tripping up over each other, which makes me a little bit excited about this season, because nobody's dropped down from the Premier League. So all these teams are going to make this team. I think this division's going to be very, very close.
Everyone's got a fire in their bellies this year.
Exactly, and I think if you look at the Valkyries B game versus Castletown Ladies B, I'm going to go with Valkyries Ladies B just for the level of experience they've got and the fact they've probably got a bit more strength and depth than Castletown. The Harlequins Ladies A versus Vikings Ladies B. I think Harlequins Ladies A are going to struggle a bit this year. I'm not quite sure they've replaced some of the players they lost over the past couple of years to university or moving on to other teams. And I think Vikings B have probably got, again, much more strength and depth than Harlequins have. So I think Vikings B for that one. But this league is going to be very, very close this year.
Is it quite common to get players changing teams? Because in netball, not to just bring it round to netball, but it's like a shock if someone changes teams.
It can be depending on the person. If the rumours are to be believed, then you're looking at, Stevie Ronan has already left Castletown and moved to Vikings for the men's season. Now that's probably one of their key players. He was their mixed captain. He was their men's captain last year, I believe. And that's a massive bonus for Vikings, and it's a huge loss for Castletown because he was their key player. He was their enforcer. He was the one that wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. He wasn't afraid to get a yellow card during a game and have a rest. And he was the one that broke down play whenever you needed it, and he was their driving force in a lot of their games. And then I've heard rumours, they may not be true, apologies if they're not true, that Robin Masson may be moving on to another squad. I don't know which one it is. It would be hearsay to mention which one. And he's an Island player, and when you're going to be losing an Island player, a striker of his standard, it's going to be a huge loss to Castletown, and you're going to struggle to replace that. It's not unusual in hockey. People want to try and attend better training sessions, so the likes of Cast Town maybe haven't quite had the attendance at training that some of the other clubs do, especially like the Backers, Valkyries and Vikings. So the more people you get at training, the better the quality of the training is.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at the Rossborough Men's Division 2. So we've got Castletown B versus Harlequins B, Ramsey B take on Valkyries C, and Saracens B take on Backers C.
I always refer to Backers Men C as my sort of last of the summer wine team, but I think I'm probably going to end up calling this league the last of the summer wine league.
Are these some of the friendliest matches that people?
I think there will
find?
be, and there's going to be some spice in some of the games, but the friendliest game of the year will probably be the Saracens Men's B versus the Backers Men's C game, because they don't really aspire to win the league; they aspire to enjoy themselves as much as they humanly can do, and if that's it's a sort of self-deprecating attitude. If they make a mistake or they do something silly on the pitch, and they laugh at themselves as much as everybody else laughs at them. It's that sort of game where everybody enjoys themselves. And I think the same can be said for the Cast Town Men's B and the Harlequins Men's B as well. They're just out to enjoy themselves.
Absolutely. Do they know that you call them the last of the summer winers?
I called them that when I was playing in that squad, so
I
hope they don't mind.
Is that how you got injured and couldn't play for a couple of weeks?
Well, this was a few years ago I played for them, and I was the youngest in the squad at one point. So.
Right, okay. And finally, it looks like it'll be a really interesting season ahead in the Rossborough Women's Division with some really close games. So we've got Valkyries C versus Saracens B and Backers C versus Vikings C.
Yeah, I think again this is going to be quite a close league. When you look at the Vikings Ladies C, they're probably going to be relying on quite a few of the young players and the under-16s team coming up. Again, that depends on what their B team and their A team are doing. So these are the teams that are going to be probably blooding the youth into these squads, because they're going to have to pick, and they're going to have to ask the under-16s to fill in from time to time. For the Backers C, Vikings Ladies C, I'm going to actually put that on Backers Ladies C. I think they've got a little bit more experience again, and depending on what their squad makeup looks like, I think they'll probably be one of the key challengers for the league. With Valkyries Ladies C and Saracens Ladies B, Saracens Ladies B, I think again are probably going to struggle with their A team in the Premier League. Their resources they're the only squad that the A team can pull their resources from. So again, they're going to change from a week-to-week basis depending on availability. So I think Valkyries C are probably favourites of that game.